We're about to talk about due process and the rights of the accused. This is a very important little section in this unit, so please make sure that you are paying attention and getting the notes that you need. Let's dive in. All right, so first things first. Due process. What is it? All right. What it's pretty much saying is this: is that due process you should equate with the legal process. Okay, like what happens from the time, or even the time leading up to or right before someone is arrested, all the way through their punishment phase. Okay, and when you look at the Bill of Rights, you can kind of see that they track through this with the Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Seventh, and Eighth Amendment. Okay, the Seventh Amendment more applies to civil cases, but specifically 4, 5, 6, and 8 are all about the due process. All right. Now, there are two types of due process that you need to be familiar with. Okay. The first one is substantive due process. Okay. Substantive due process is fairly simple. It is, the essence of the law or what the law concerns, or as I've highlighted here for you, what the law is about. Okay. Is this law fair? Is it unfair? All right. But what we're going to spend more time talking about today, and because specifically it is about the due process amendments within the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, is how justice is carried out. And when we talk about this, we're talking about procedural. Okay, you can see kind of process, procedural. We've got the same little root right there. How the law is being carried out. Okay, or how justice is being manifested. All right, so first thing I want you to know about procedural due process is we've talked about this, the Warren Court. It's one of our famous Supreme Courts. They did a lot of stuff to expand rights, and one of the main things that they extended liberties on, like we've talked about with Fourth Amendment, searches and seizures, right to legal counsel, that's in the Sixth Amendment, and right against self-incrimination. Okay, and that's going to come from the Fifth Amendment. We're going to talk about all of those today. And remember, self-incrimination is just when you do not have to go. If you are on trial for something, you do not have to testify against yourself, meaning that it is up to the prosecutor to prove you guilty without putting you on the stand and having you, cross-examined. All right, so some things about procedural due process as well. You're going to need to know probable cause. That's definitely a phrase you need to know, okay? It's a reasonable belief that a crime has been committed or that there is evidence indicating so, all right? So, with probable cause, what I want to make sure that you get here is that word probable, probably, okay? There's probably a crime that's been committed. Now, I'm not going to take time to go through it and everything, but I would highly recommend checking out this green part right here because this is going to tell you how this applies in schools, because I'm going to just let you know, administration, SROs, security at schools, they have a much lower bar to get over than probable cause to be able to search your stuff. And I know that may get you all huffity-puffity and whatever, and if you got a problem with it, then, I don't know, go get your law degree and become a federal judge and, do something about it. This video down here at the bottom also will kind of tell you, this is about the court case where this precedent about what they can do in schools and what they can't do in schools was established. It's called New Jersey versus TLO. All right, so first thing, y'all probably have heard of this and everything. You may not have heard of the court case, Miranda versus Arizona, but I'm sure that you have heard of the Miranda rights, okay? So just a quick little background. This is a court case you don't need to know. I just want to give you some background real quick. Man is arrested for kidnapping and rape. He confesses, but he is never provided the information that, hey, you don't have to talk to these police officers, okay? And he goes through the court system. He's found guilty. He appeals all the way up, and it eventually gets to the Supreme Court, and they say that due process includes, and this is huge here, this is an extension, making people aware of their right to counsel, okay, their right to a lawyer, and to not incriminate themselves before the arresting process takes place, okay, or as the arresting process is taking place, all right? And this is where we get the Miranda rights, all right, or what we come to call the Miranda warning. And if you watched a cop show, then you have seen it happen, okay? So, suspects have got to be made aware of their Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights. The Supreme Court creates the Miranda warning. You know how it starts. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to a lawyer. Blah, 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 blah. All right. I will say one thing to note is there is a public safety exception, and I'm going to just go ahead and tell you, you need to make sure that you know that, a public safety exception, okay? Meaning this, if that, like, there's, like, the public safety is at hand. That means that you do not have to, like, read them these rights. Like, if you are trying to, you know, talk to them, get, like, some sort of information out of them, that is something that can still be administered in court, even though you did not read them their rights, because it's about the public. Remember, in this unit, one of the big things that we're talking about, individualism, public order, and how we balance those things, okay? This is kind of summing up what you need to know about the previous two slides. Please make sure you know what self-incrimination is. Make sure you know the Miranda warning, and make sure you know that the Miranda warning can be waived if it has to do with public safety. All right? We're going to talk about right to counsel for those of you who are pretty big on information about the death penalty, as we talked about in a previous video. You can kind of see a little bit more information about that down below. All right, this is your Fourth Amendment. I would pause it real quick and read it. The main thing I want to bring your attention to is that underlined word about halfway through, warrants, okay? Warrants. That's what we're going to talk about, especially as it comes to those things that you can't keep your faces off of. All right? So, first thing, you have to know this. You have got to know this phrase, the exclusionary rule, okay? So, what this very simply means is this, is that if evidence is illegally obtained or obtained without a proper warrant, it cannot be used in the prosecution of someone, okay? And when they're establishing this, they call it fruit from a poisonous tree. And this is the idea here. If you've got a tree and it's poisonous, then the fruit that it produces is going to be, you got it, poisonous, okay? It's that same idea. Hey, if you get something illegally, then how is it fair, or how is it right that this is being used to, you know, do, like, convict someone or find justice, okay? It's like there needs to be, quote, quote, justice all the way through the process, all right? Exclusionary rule. Know it, know it, know it. What? Know it. All right. Here we go. Those things you can't keep your faces off of, your cell phones. Let's talk about them real quick, because this is definitely something that's pretty big with the Fourth Amendment right now. So obviously it's not that long ago, but one of our main events that you need to make sure you're familiar with is 9/11. And right after 9/11, the Congress passed this thing called the Patriot Act. It is an acronym. Please go to the link and read the first 3 paragraphs, just so you can kind of get familiar with what the information is. I will tell you, you do need to know about the Patriot Act. You also need to know about the USA Freedom Act. They are both something that is testable material, so please just read this. I tried to condense it to the most important stuff you need to. Read the first 3 paragraphs of the Patriot Act. Read the purpose section of the USA Freedom Act, okay? But what you're going to see is 2 pieces of legislation that are on, like, opposite ends of things here, where you have one where people are not feeling secure and therefore willing to give up their freedoms, and then you have another one where all of a sudden people feel safe and they're like, no, I need my freedoms back, okay? It's not right. And you're going to learn about government kind of collecting information from cell phones. You're going to learn, I believe it's in the USA Freedom, you're going to learn about the PRISM program, where they're, you know, gathering and storing all the stuff that we look at on the internet. All right. So please make sure that you give these a look. And like I said, you need to know these, okay? Patriot Act and USA Freedom Act. Now this is something that just changed. I believe it was last year or maybe the year before. So for a long time, I know, like, when y'all, like, get your new little apps or, you know, your things, you get that little warning at the beginning, like your terms and services that are like 48 pages long. And I know that you read every single word of it. No, you don't. And what you don't realize is a lot of the information that you are giving up and who you are giving it up to, that's not stuff you're looking at. You're just like, oh man, I want to be able to have this filter that makes me look like a baby. Oh man, I just want a TikTok. All right, so one of the big things I just want to point out real quickly, the Supreme Court recently departed from a precedent that said the government didn't need a warrant to go and get their information from a third party. So, like, for example, they could go to TikTok and be like, hey, can we get this information about so-and-so? And TikTok, if they wanted to, could be like, here you go. Or, as many of these businesses and organizations and apps do, they sell the information. Because what do we do with the money? we follow it. All right. This is the due process clause. There's one in the 5th Amendment, and that's going to strictly apply to the federal government. There's also one in the 14th Amendment, and it is going to be the one, last we've talked about, that is used to selectively incorporate the Bill of Rights. Obviously, you need to write this down. It's highlighted as important. Why do we have the 5th and 6th Amendment? To ensure that our liberties are not eclipsed or covered up by the need of security or social order, okay? This is the time that we're living in now where we're seeing like some of our rights here and there being kind of superseded in the name of security. And we're going to talk about that balance a little bit. All right, main thing, this is the 5th and 6th Amendment. I would pause it and just read it real quick. I mean, it's not that long. It's pretty important stuff to know. Please make sure that you note this. But this is what we really need to get to. Gideon versus Wainwright. All right, this is one of your final 4 SCOTUS briefs. Do those, and if you haven't done the ones from the First Amendment, go and turn it in. Get it done, please. Please. Okay, so this is what you need to know is before 1963. All right. And I want to just go back and let you see this real quick. That very last line of the 6th Amendment. And to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Okay, so you get the assistance of counsel. What this means is before 1963 is that you cannot deny someone from having a lawyer, but it doesn't mean that the court will appoint a lawyer for somebody. Okay, and this changes over time. Like, it starts off where you don't have to have a lawyer, or you don't have to have a lawyer at all, or they don't have to appoint one at all. Then once a little bit later in time, I think it's like mid-1800s, early 1800s, they start to say, hey, if you're up for the death penalty, then you need to have a lawyer. And then it eventually gets to felonies, you should have a lawyer. Misdemeanors, you should have a lawyer. But it's all about, like, this. We're talking about court-appointed lawyers, okay? Now, what I want you to see here is this. What this case does, and this is one of the main important things to know, you need to read the brief on it so that you have the insides and outs. And there's a great movie on this as well called Gideon's Trumpet that I would definitely recommend checking out. But this is what you need to know. Guaranteed the rights of a lawyer in criminal felony cases for the poor, for those who cannot afford it, okay? 1963 is a huge time period, or a huge year, for those who are for the impoverished, okay? And you may be like, why? And I'd be like, great question, all right? Because when we think about, like, for example, MLK, all right? We think about him leading or being a main member of the civil rights movement. And when we think of civil rights, we think like people of color and their rights. But what I want you to make sure you understand is this, is that MLK is very, very big on leading people out of poverty, or believing that, you know, poverty is a major problem in the United States, not just for people of color, but it seems to be disproportionately affecting people of color and making sure that they are treated more fairly. As you see down here at the bottom in green, we're going to have the 24th Amendment also get ratified in 1963, which is going to abolish the poll tax, which was the money you had to pay to be able to vote. And when you have to decide between buying dinner for your family and voting, most people are going to choose to buy dinner for their family. Okay? Please make sure that you connect this to the 6th Amendment's right to counsel, this Gideon versus Wainwright. Please make sure that you took good notes over this section. I love you and I care about you. Here you go. Boom. This is my favorite book I've ever read right here. East of Eden, John Steinbeck. It's a great one. I'm just encouraging you during this time. Don't just sit in front of your screen the whole time. Do something that's productive. Read a good book. Do, write something, paint something, create something. I don't care. Do something creative, okay? Because those video games are fun and mindless, and I get all of that, but there is no long-term payoff to it, okay? In 4 years, you're not going to care. Books can change you forever. This book changed me forever. Great antagonist, Kathy. Whew. Horrible woman. All right. Love y'all. Y'all are amazing. Have a great day.